The morning the police arrived for Lila, I felt the world tilt. The soft light in my garden did nothing to hide the truth anymore. Her betrayal, and her plan to become me, stood exposed at last. It is strange how a life can look perfectly calm in the very moment it begins to break open. The steam rising from my teacup, the faint shimmer of dew on the rose leaves, the sound of a distant lawnmower cutting through the quiet, like any other peaceful suburban morning. But nothing about that morning was ordinary. Not the police cruiser rolling slowly up my driveway. Not the way the tires crunched over the gravel, steady and final. And certainly not the shadow that crossed Lila's face when she saw the officer step out and walk toward my porch. She had been smiling at me only moments before. She always smiled in the mornings, wide, warm, inviting, as if she had been waiting her entire life to greet me across that old fence. I had come to dread that smile, the way it stretched a little too far, the way it hovered, like she was gauging my reaction. But the instant the officers turned in her direction, that smile collapsed, like paper left in the rain. I stood still, robe wrapped tight around me, my fingers curled around the notebook that had become my anchor in the storm she created. A black, spiral-bound journal, innocent in appearance, damning in content. The younger officer approached me. "Mrs. Dalka?" His voice carried the polite firmness of someone trained to deliver difficult truths without emotion. Behind him, the older officer scanned the yard, his hand resting near his belt, not threateningly, but with an awareness that made me feel both protected and exposed. "Yes," I said, though the word came out quiet, caught between relief and disbelief. "We received your evidence," he continued. "We'll need to speak with your neighbor." He didn't need to say her name. Lila was already walking toward us, fast, too fast, her gardening gloves still stuffed into her back pocket, her stride confident, but her eyes wild. "Is there a problem here?" she asked. Her voice was sweet, almost gentle, but there was an edge underneath, like a violin string pulled too tight. The officers turned to her, and for the first time since she moved in, Lila didn't have a script ready. Her gaze flicked to the notebook in my hand. I saw the exact moment recognition struck her. Her pupils tightening, her jaw tensing, a flash of panic rippling beneath the surface like a trapped fish thrashing just before it's caught. I didn't speak. I didn't move. My silence felt heavier than any accusation I could have uttered. The older officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we need to discuss some concerns brought to our attention." "Concerns?" She laughed softly, too softly. "About what? We're neighbors. We help each other. Don't we, Elaine?" She turned to me with a pleading look I had never seen from her before. But beneath it, beneath the trembling smile and widened eyes, I saw anger, accusation, a silent demand. "How dare you?" But it wasn't me who had crossed into her home. It wasn't me who'd gone through her drawers or rehearsed her signature. She had done all of that to me. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding," she insisted. "I've been nothing but supportive. She's been struggling, officers. I've been helping her manage things." And there it was, the lie she had been preparing, carving, shaping for weeks. A perfect little blade. The older officer nodded once, professionally. "We'll need to ask you some questions down at the station." Lila blinked hard. "Questions? Why? About what?" Her voice cracked, and for the first time, her breath hitched audibly. "This is ridiculous. I'm her friend." Friend. The word stung. Not because she wasn't, but because I had once desperately wanted her to be. Before the missing mail. Before the forged signature. Before I found the video of her whispering my name in my empty kitchen. The officer stepped closer. She stepped back. "Ma'am," the younger officer said, tone firmer now, "we have substantial evidence of identity theft attempts. We're asking you to come with us peacefully." Her face twisted, just for a second, into something sharp and furious. A raw crack in the mask she wore every day. "That's absurd," she snapped. "Elaine, tell them. Tell them this is a misunderstanding." But I couldn't. I wouldn't. And even if I had tried, the evidence would have drowned any excuse she offered. Instead, I held her gaze. Her expression shifted from anger to disbelief, then, strangely, to something close to heartbreak, as if she truly thought she deserved my defense. As if the weeks she spent slipping into my home had been an act of devotion rather than violation. "I trusted you," she whispered. "I helped you." The lie stung more than any truth ever could. The officers moved to her sides. She stiffened, her chin trembled. And then, the moment I will never forget, the instant when her entire scheme began to fall from her like ash. She turned her head away from us, just slightly, but enough that her shoulders shook with one single, silent sob. It wasn't remorse, it was fear. Fear of losing the identity she had worked so hard to steal. The younger officer opened her gate. She hesitated, teetering on the edge of fight or flight. Then, slowly, she walked through it, her steps shaky, her breath uneven. I watched her pass the hydrangea bush she'd so carefully trimmed, the same one she'd used as an excuse to stand closer to my window, the same one she'd inspected with suspicious interest the first day she moved in. The gate clicked behind her, the same latch she had fixed so she could come and go more easily without me noticing. The sound felt like a truth sealing itself. As they guided her to the cruiser, she looked over her shoulder one last time. Not at the officers. Not at the street. At me. Her eyes were wide, wounded, furious. A storm of emotions twisting inside her like a rope being pulled too tight. And in that look, I finally understood something I had sensed for weeks, but had never admitted aloud. She wasn't pretending to want my life. She believed it was already hers. The cruiser door shut with a heavy click, and suddenly the yard felt colder. The morning sun dimmed behind a passing cloud. Even the birds quieted, as though the world itself were holding its breath. The officers thanked me, told me they'd be in touch, and returned to their vehicle. As the car pulled away, taking Lila with it, the air shifted again. The tension that had knotted itself around my lungs finally loosened. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe fully. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of meaning, full of truth, full of the weight of everything she had tried to take from me. My identity, my safety, my freedom, my sense of self. I wrapped my robe tighter around me and stepped onto the porch. My teacup was still warm. My garden still glowed in the morning light. But I felt older, wiser, and strangely grateful. Not for what happened, but for what it revealed. Standing there, I looked down at the notebook in my hands, the notebook that had saved me. Pages filled with small moments I refused to ignore. Dates, times, missing mail, strange noises, a copied key, a familiar perfume lingering where it shouldn't. Proof that quiet strength, when called upon, can be sharper than any blade. I pressed the cover closed and exhaled. It was over, or at least the worst of it. But to understand how Lila became the shadow in my doorway, to understand how her kindness became a weapon and how my trust became the snare she used, to understand why I didn't see the danger until it was almost too late, I need to take you back. Back to the day she moved in, back to the moment she crossed the fence with a smile that hid everything she planned to take. Back to the beginning of the life she tried to make her own. I remember the morning she moved in, as clearly as the morning she was taken away. Maybe even more clearly, because back then I thought nothing extraordinary was happening. Just a moving truck backing into the driveway next door, its engine humming beneath the usual Saturday quiet. Just a woman stepping out, squinting into the sunlight, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Just a neighbor. I had my gardening gloves on, kneeling near the hydrangeas, the same ones she'd later prune without asking. The earth smelled rich and cool beneath my fingers, and the air carried that early spring crispness that makes you feel like a new season is promising something gentle, something fresh. I didn't yet know that the woman stepping out of the truck would press her roots into my life deeper than any flower in my yard. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" she called out. Her voice floated easily across the fence. Light, cheerful, almost musical. I looked up, shading my eyes with one dirt-caked glove. There she was, Lila. She wore jeans, clean white sneakers, and a lilac-colored shirt that matched her name too perfectly to be an accident. Her hair was a warm brown, loosely tied in a ponytail that looked effortless in the way only deliberate things ever do. She walked toward the fence with practiced confidence, as though she had already imagined this moment long before it happened. "Good morning," I said, pulling myself to my feet. My knees complained the way they always did, but I ignored them. "You must be the new neighbor. And you must be Elaine." She smiled. Wide, bright, familiar. "The realtor told me all about you. Said you're the sweetest woman on the block." I laughed softly. She must have been exaggerating. She wasn't. Lila rested her forearms on the fence, leaning forward comfortably. Too comfortably. "Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Really, I am. I think this street is exactly what I need. Peaceful. Safe. Safe." The word hung strangely in the air. She said it with the kind of emphasis people use when they're trying to convince someone, maybe even themselves. "Well, welcome," I said. "If you need anything." "Oh, I need everything," she interrupted with a bashful laugh. "Moving is exhausting. And I swear, the movers must have packed my kitchen in 15 different boxes. You wouldn't happen to know where the best place to get coffee around here is, would you?" That was how she did it. So subtle, so effortless. She didn't ask for help. She created connection. She ushered herself into my routine with friendliness that felt disarming, even flattering. "Try maple and pine. Downtown," I told her. "They have good pastries, too." "Perfect," she said, her smile widening. "Maybe we could go together sometime?" I nodded automatically. It felt polite, innocent, neighborly. She kept her eyes on me a second too long, studying my expression, measuring my response. Then she pushed away from the fence. "I need to get back to unpacking. But truly, thank you for the warm welcome." Warm welcome? I had said only a few words, but she made it feel like I had opened a door she was relieved to step through. "We. Blank. Underscore. Blank." She returned an hour later with coffee. "For me." "I didn't know how you liked it," she said, holding out a cup with both hands. "So I guessed. I hope that's all right." The cup was warm against my palms, the lid still damp with condensation. She had chosen it carefully. Flat white, just a hint of honey. A drink I used to order often, though I hadn't in years. "How did you?" I began. "Oh, intuition," she said quickly. "I'm good at reading people. Something in me stiffened." I didn't know why. Maybe it was the way she said it, or the way her eyes flicked across my yard, as though memorizing each detail. But I forced a smile. "Well, thank you. That was thoughtful. It's nothing," she said. "Neighbors take care of each other, right?" She tilted her head, waiting, almost expecting my agreement. And I gave it, because it felt harmless. "Yes," I said. "Of course." Her shoulders relaxed. Her smile deepened, like I had passed a test I didn't know I was taking. Blank. Underscore. Underscore. Lax. Over the next few days, she created reasons to appear. A question about trash pickup. A comment about the weather. A plate of cookies she baked too many of. An offer to help me carry groceries. Little things. Ordinary things. The kind of gestures lonely people learn to appreciate. I had been widowed for years. My friends lived across town. My son was busy with his own life. Most days were quiet enough to hear the house creak when the temperature changed. So when someone new and warm and attentive stepped into that quiet, it felt like a blessing, or so I thought. It wasn't until later, much later, that I realized how intentional every gesture had been, like stepping stones arranged one by one to lead me exactly where she wanted me. Jolie, blank, underscore, blank. One afternoon while I was pulling weeds near the porch, she appeared again, carrying a small plastic bag. "Brought you something," she said. "What's this?" She knelt beside me, brushing soil from her knee without care for her jeans. "Just some bulbs. Spring lilies. I thought they'd look nice in this patch here." She pointed with certainty, as though she had been studying my yard for weeks. "They're lovely," I said, "but you didn't have to." "I wanted to," she said quickly. Too quickly. "You mentioned your husband planted these years ago. I thought maybe something new would be a good start." I hadn't told her that. Had I? I paused, searching my memory. A faint unease prickled at the back of my neck. Had I mentioned it? Or had she overheard something through our thin fence? Or read it somewhere, if she had searched for it? She saw my hesitation. "I'm sorry," she said lightly. "The realtor mentioned it. She said your husband loved gardening." "Oh," I murmured, and my unease settled again, like dust that had been briefly disturbed. But something lingered. Why did she focus so intensely on the details of my life? Why did she ask about my routines, my medications, my grocery store preferences? Why did she remember every small thing I said, even things I barely remembered saying at all? I should have noticed it then. The way her questions flowed like ribbons, soft, delicate, but binding. The way she watched everything with those warm brown eyes that never stopped studying. But kindness blinds you sometimes, especially when you haven't felt chosen in a long time. Mara's blank, underscore, blank. A week after she moved in, she invited herself into my home. She didn't phrase it that way, of course. She arrived with a mason jar of soup, holding it with pride. "I made too much," she said, laughing. "And you mentioned your hips were bothering you. Let me bring this in for you." I began to protest, but she was already stepping past me into the kitchen, her shoes quiet on the hardwood floor. She set the jar on the counter, looking around with admiration that felt, at first, flattering. "Oh, Elaine," she said softly, "your home is so you." She walked slowly, fingertips brushing the back of a chair, eyes landing on framed photographs of my husband, my son, my younger self. Her gaze lingered too long on the picture of me taken the year I retired. Eyes bright, hair shorter, smile unburdened. "You look beautiful here," she said. Something in the way she said it chilled me. Not admiration, not nostalgia, something else. But before I could place it, she asked, "Where do you keep your spoons?" As if she belonged there, as if helping herself was the most natural thing in the world, I told her. And she remembered. Blank, underscore, blank. Later that afternoon, my friend Marjorie called. "You have a new neighbor?" she asked. "What's she like?" "Nice," I said. "Very attentive." Marjorie snorted. "Attentive?" At our age, that's usually code for nosy. I laughed, but the comment stuck with me. Nosy wasn't the right word for Lila. It wasn't curiosity, and it wasn't friendliness. It was precision. As though she were assembling a puzzle only she could see. Pen, blank, underscore, blank. That night, after she left, I found a folded piece of paper on my kitchen counter. Not mine, not something I recognized. A grocery list, but not in my handwriting. Butter, herbal tea, lozenges, hair dye, almond milk, vitamin D, Elaine's bread, multivitamin, Elaine. Keys? My breath caught. Elaine's bread? Elaine. Keys? I stared at the words until they blurred. Perhaps it wasn't what it looked like. Perhaps it was leftovers from her purse or pocket. Perhaps. But deep inside, beneath the part of me that wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, something colder whispered the truth. She wasn't studying me because she liked me. She was studying me because she needed to. Because she wanted something. Because she was building something I wasn't meant to see. I folded the paper slowly, tucking it into my notebook before I even understood why. Quiet strength, my husband used to say, is just awareness held with dignity. That night, awareness arrived. Dignity would take longer. J, blank, underscore, blank. She came to my door the next morning with another smile. Another excuse, another piece of the web she was spinning. And I opened the door. Because I didn't yet know the danger. Because I didn't yet know what she had planned. Because I didn't yet know she had already stepped so quietly into my life that she believed it was only a matter of time before I stepped out of it. If I had listened to the quiet feeling in my chest, the one that rose whenever Lila's footsteps approached, I might have saved myself weeks of doubt, confusion, and uneasy sleep. But suspicion feels rude when someone is kind to you, especially when the kindness comes packaged in warmth and attentiveness. It is easier to believe in generosity than manipulation, easier to accept a smile than to question why it appears so often and so close. So when Lila brought over a casserole dish the very next morning, I thanked her. And when she insisted on carrying it all the way to my kitchen, I let her. Her presence filled the house the way a candle scent lingers long after the flame is out. Pleasant, familiar, hard to put your finger on. "Your home has such character," she murmured as she set the dish down. "So much history." "Most of it good, I hope," I said lightly. She turned toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "History is what we make it, isn't it?" Before I could reply, she reached for the framed wedding picture on my shelf, my late husband in his gray suit. Me too young to understand how fast life gallops forward. "He looks like a good man," she said. He was. "Did he ever worry about you living alone?" A simple question. Innocent on the surface. Yet something in the way she asked it made the hairs at the back of my neck prickle. "He trusted me to take care of myself," I answered. She placed the picture back carefully. Too carefully. Her fingertips lingered on the glass a heartbeat longer than necessary. Then she shifted, letting the moment dissolve. "Well, if you ever need anything, you know where I am," she said, gliding toward the back door like she'd lived there all her life. "I'll check on you later. Check on me." The words floated in the quiet long after she left. I stood there in the kitchen, hands resting on the counter, staring at the casserole as if it might contain the answers I needed. But it was just food. Just another kindness. Just another reason to doubt my own instincts. And that was how she worked. Kindness first. Familiarity second. Access third. Over the next few days, the pattern grew so gradually that I didn't notice it until too late. She started getting my mail from the porch before I could reach it. It was windy, Elaine. I didn't want it blowing away. She began reminding me about my medical appointments. "Your cardiologist called. You don't want to forget that." She appeared at my door whenever a package arrived. I saw the delivery truck and thought I'd bring this in for you. Every gesture seemed thoughtful, helpful, neighborly, but kindness can feel heavy when it begins to replace your autonomy. One afternoon, she walked into my yard without knocking, carrying a bag of groceries. "You mentioned needing almond milk, remember?" she said, passing the bag into my hands before I could protest. I stared at the contents, my favorite brand, the exact size I bought, and the bread I'd eaten since my 20s. The same bread she had written on that folded list I found on my counter. Elaine's bread. "I didn't say anything about milk," I murmured. "You didn't have to. I pay attention." Her smile softened. "I just want to help." I forced myself to thank her, though unease curled under my tongue like bitterness. I carried the bag inside and set it on the counter. When I returned to the yard, she was already trimming my hydrangeas. "Be careful with those," I said, unable to mask my worry. "My husband planted them." "I know," she said without looking up. "They'll look even nicer after a little shaping. They belong to me, but in that moment, they might as well have belonged to her." Later that evening, I found a small pile of clipped branches stacked neatly near my porch. Too much. She had taken too much. That bush had been a living memory of my husband's gentleness, and now it stood hollowed, exposed, like a wound. I told myself it was only plants, only gardening. It was not a crime. But something inside me whispered that she had crossed a line she never intended to step back from. The next morning she appeared again, knocking lightly on the door before letting herself in. "I made breakfast," she called out cheerfully. "Thought we could eat together. It's such a nice day for company." I found her in my kitchen, plating eggs and toast as if she had lived there for years. She looked up with that bright, practiced smile. "I hope you don't mind. I didn't want you to start your day alone. Start my day alone." As if solitude were a flaw she needed to correct. "Lila," I said gently, "you don't have to do all this." "I know," she said with a soft laugh, "but I want to." After breakfast, she washed the dishes without asking, humming quietly. She moved with the confidence of someone who had memorized the layout of my kitchen. And maybe she had. Her hands didn't hesitate even once. At one point, she reached for the cabinet where I kept my medication. She opened it, retrieved the bottle, and set it beside me. "You forgot to take these yesterday," she said. I froze. "How do you know that?" I asked. "You mentioned it," she replied smoothly. I hadn't. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. Then her voice softened, as if performing regret. "Sorry. I just worry about you, Elaine. Worry. That word again." It threaded through her sentences like a charm bracelet she kept rattling until I couldn't ignore it. As she continued washing dishes, I examined the pill bottle. It was turned outward, label facing away from the wall, positioned differently than I had left it. She had touched it. She had handled it. The thought tightened a cold thread around my spine. "Your son must worry, too," she added over her shoulder. "Being so far away," my heart skipped. "I didn't tell you where my son lives." She dried her hands slowly, keeping her back to me. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she turned. Smile reassembled. "I must have overheard when you were on the phone. These houses are close. Sound travels." Her explanation was too easy, too prepared. But I swallowed my doubt, because it was easier. Later that day, I called Marjorie. "How's the new neighbor?" she asked. "She's kind." "Kind how?" "All the time," I said. "In every way." There was a pause. Then Marjorie asked, "Is it kindness, or is she inserting herself?" I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I had never seen anyone try so hard to belong to my life. And I'm not sure I had ever let anyone in that fast. Not even friends, not even family. Loneliness makes you vulnerable. It makes you open doors you normally keep locked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of my kitchen cabinets, my medication, my mail, the trimmed hydrangea, the list she left, the way she walked through my home like she was cataloging each detail, each space, each moment of my daily life. As if preparing. For what? I didn't yet dare to imagine. I got up, wrapped myself in my robe, and walked softly to the kitchen. The moonlight spilled across the counter, silver and sharp. My house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that amplifies every small sound. I opened the drawer where I kept my spare keys. But the dish was empty. For a moment my mind tried to offer excuses. I must have moved them. I must have forgotten. I must have misplaced them somewhere else. But the truth rose slowly, like a tide that could no longer be ignored. They were gone. Taken. I sat down at the table, the air thick around me, and pressed my hands flat against the wood to keep them from trembling. Outside, a soft breeze stirred the leaves. And somewhere in the darkness next door, a light flicked on in Lila's kitchen. A silhouette moved past the window. She was awake. Awake. And moving through her house with the same eerie confidence she had begun to move through mine. A cold realization settled in my chest. Heavy. Sharp. She wasn't inserting herself into my life. She was practicing, learning, preparing for something far more dangerous than kindness. I didn't sleep at all that night. And by the time dawn crept across my windowsill, the quiet feeling in my chest was no longer a whisper. It was a warning. Sleep did not come easy after I discovered the missing keys. It did not come at all. I sat at the kitchen table through the small hours of the night, listening to the old house expand and settle around me. Pipes murmured. Floorboards creaked. The refrigerator hummed in the background like a second heart. And underneath it all was the quiet certainty that someone had reached into my life and taken something that did not belong to them. It was not just about the keys. It was about what they represented. A small, simple way of saying, I can come and go as I please. When the first hint of morning brushed the sky with gray, I made a decision. I reached for my notebook. I had used it for grocery lists, reminders, the occasional recipe, nothing more. But now the lined pages became something else. A place to put what I could not ignore, even if I wanted to. Missing spare keys. List found on counter. Medication moved. Mail delivered by Lila. Hydrangea trimmed without asking. I wrote each item quietly, as if not to startle myself. There they were, in ink, no longer scattered thoughts in the fog of my mind. Patterns. A story forming in the spaces between the words. By the time the sun reached the tops of the trees, I had showered, dressed, and prepared myself for what I knew was coming. Because of course she came. Mid-morning, there was the soft, practiced knock on my door. 3 taps, evenly spaced. Not loud enough to be intrusive, not light enough to be ignored. I opened the door. Good morning, Lila said brightly, holding a stack of envelopes in one hand and a paper bag in the other. I brought your mail. The carrier dropped it in the wrong box again. You really should complain. She laughed softly, as if she were on my side. I looked at the envelopes before I looked at her. There was a flyer for garden supplies, a charity letter, and an electricity bill. All addressed to me. All opened. There is a slit in my mailbox, I said evenly. The mail is supposed to go inside, not next door. I know, she said, unbothered. But I saw our mailman walking too fast again. He is always mixing us up. I just thought I would save you the trouble. My gaze drifted from the opened envelopes to her face. You opened them, I said. Oh. She glanced down, feigning surprise. I did not even notice. I was sorting mine and yours together, and must have. I am so sorry, Elaine. I did not read anything. You know I would never invade your privacy. The lie was clean, polished, ready to serve. Next time, I said slowly, you can just put them in my box. I will get them. Her smile flickered, then settled back into place. Of course. I was only trying to help. She lifted the paper bag in her other hand. I brought breakfast, maple and pine. I remembered you liked the honey pastry. I took the bag because refusing it would mean more conversation, and I did not yet trust my voice. She stepped closer, peering past me into the hallway. Did you sleep? She asked. You look tired. The words slid under my skin like something sharp. The fact that she could see the fatigue I tried to hide made me feel exposed. I am fine, I said. Just an early morning. She nodded slowly, as if filing that away. Let me know if you need anything, she said. You know I am right next door. That was what frightened me. After she left, I brought the mail and the bag into the kitchen. I set the pastry on a plate, poured myself tea, and opened the notebook again. Lila brought mail. All opened. Said it was an accident. I stopped, the pen hovering above the page. Then I wrote the thought that had been circling in my mind. Feels intentional. The word looked strange in my handwriting. I was a retired teacher. I believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt, in waiting for proof before judgment. But doubt and benefit only work when both people are honest. The phone rang then, sharp and sudden in the quiet. I answered on the second ring. Hello, Mrs. Dalka. This is Janet from Fairview Savings. My grip on the receiver tightened. Yes, Janet, is something wrong? Nothing urgent, she said. We just noticed there was an inquiry about changing your contact information and mailing address last week. We wanted to confirm whether that was you. Blood pounded in my ears. No, I said. It was not. There was a pause on the other end. All right. Then we will block any changes until we see you in person. I am so glad we checked. Thank you. I managed. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, the dial tone echoing in my memories of old days when my husband answered the phone with easy confidence. He had once told me, if anything ever feels wrong with money, trust your gut. My gut felt very, very wrong. Someone had tried to change my contact information, my address, my mail. I reached again for the notebook. Bank called. Someone attempted to change address. Not me. I hesitated, then wrote the next line, even though my hand shook. Suspect Lila. Writing it did not make it true, but it forced me to look at the possibility without flinching. Later that afternoon, my doorbell rang again. Not Lila this time. Marjorie. Her visit came like a breath of clean air. She walked in with her usual brisk energy, carrying a tin of cookies and the familiar scent of lavender soap. You look like you have not slept in a week, she said, squinting at me. I came to make sure you are still alive. Barely, I said, but I smiled. We settled at the kitchen table, and just as I started to feel the tightness in my chest loosen, there was another knock at the door. 3 gentle taps. Marjorie raised an eyebrow. That will be her, I suppose. I went to the door. Elaine, Lila said, her face brightening as if she were pleasantly surprised. I hope I am not interrupting. I saw a car in your driveway and thought I would check in. She knew exactly whose car it was, the same one she had seen 100 times. But she played innocent. Come in, I said out of habit, though part of me did not want her to cross the threshold. She stepped inside, taking in the sight of Marjorie at the table. Her smile shifted. Not much. Just a fraction. Enough that I could feel the temperature in the room change. "Oh," she said, "I did not realize you had company." "Lila," I said, "this is my friend Marjorie. We have known each other for almost 30 years. Marjorie stood, extending a hand. "Nice to meet you. I have heard a lot about you." "I hope mostly good things," Lila replied, taking her hand. "That depends on the day," Marjorie said. Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp. She did not let go of Lila's hand immediately, and an unspoken challenge hung in the space between them. "Sit," I said quickly. "I can make more tea." "Oh no, I do not want to impose," Lila said, even as she pulled out a chair. "I just came by to drop this off." She held up a small envelope. "You had another piece of my mail in your box. Funny, the mailman just cannot get us straight." I took the envelope. It was not addressed to me. It had her name and my address. A plain white envelope with the logo of a medical clinic in the corner. "Thank you," I said, setting it on the table. Lila glanced at the cookies, the teapot, the 2 cups. Her gaze rested on Marjorie's keys on the counter for a heartbeat too long. Then she turned back to me. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "After that call from the bank?" The room seemed to tilt. I had not told her about the bank. My silence must have betrayed me, because she rushed to fill it. "Oh, I saw the number on your caller ID," she said quickly. "Fairview Savings. I used to bank there, remember?" I assumed it must have been about one of those ridiculous promotional offers they do. Her explanation was smooth. But not smooth enough for Marjorie. "I do not like when people assume things about my friend," Marjorie said calmly, stirring her tea. "Especially about her finances." Lila's smile tightened. "I was just concerned." "You seem very concerned," Marjorie replied, "for someone who barely knows her." A sharp silence followed. Lila looked at me, searching my face for rescue. "She has been very kind," I said carefully. "She has helped me with groceries and mail." "Mail," Marjorie repeated. "That is quite a lot of access." Lila's eyes flashed. "Well, some of us care if she has what she needs. It can be hard living alone at her age." "At our age," Marjorie corrected. "And caring is different from controlling." The word landed between them like a stone. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I wanted the ground to open and swallow the whole awkward exchange. But part of me felt something else. Gratitude. For weeks I had carried my unease alone. Now someone else said aloud what I had not dared to. Lila stood abruptly. "I should go," she said. I did not realize I was intruding. She turned to me. "If you need anything, I am still right next door. Day or night." She let that last part hang in the air before walking out. We waited until the door closed and her footsteps faded. "Well," Marjorie said, sitting back down. "She does not like competition." I exhaled slowly. That was a bit much. Marjorie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Elaine, I am going to say something, and I need you to hear it. She is not just nosy. She is invested, in a way that is not normal." I looked down at the notebook stacked beside the phone. "I know," I whispered. "Has she touched your money? Your documents?" Marjorie pressed. "Not that I can prove," I said. "But the bank called today. Someone tried to change my address." Marjorie's eyes darkened. "Then this is no longer just a feeling." I nodded, my throat tight. After she left later that afternoon, the house felt emptier than usual. I moved through the rooms, straightening magazines, adjusting cushions, making small corrections to a world that felt increasingly off balance. In my bedroom, I paused, drawn to the jewelry box on my dresser. It was an old wooden box with a carved lid, a gift from my husband on our 15th anniversary. Inside were the small pieces of my life that mattered most. I opened it, running my fingers over the familiar contents. The gold bracelet my mother had worn on her wedding day, the tiny silver locket I had worn as a girl, the ring my husband had given me after our son was born. I always kept the locket in the same corner. A tiny heart on a delicate chain. Inside was a picture of my parents on the day they left their home country, small and determined and hopeful. But the corner where it belonged was empty. I frowned, pushing aside the other pieces. Maybe it had slipped under something. Maybe it was tangled with the bracelet. I lifted each item, one by one, checking the velvet lining beneath. Nothing. The room grew very quiet. I checked again. The bottom drawer. The box beside it. The catch-all dish on my nightstand. My purse. The bathroom counter. Nothing. The locket was gone. I stood in the middle of my bedroom, the late afternoon light reaching across the floor like long fingers. I tried to breathe slowly, to reason with myself. Maybe I had moved it and forgotten. Maybe I had worn it recently and placed it somewhere else. But I knew I had not worn it in months. I kept it for special days. Important days. Days when I needed to remember who I was. My hands trembled as I returned to the kitchen, opened my notebook, and wrote the next line. Family locket missing. Then, after a slow breath, I added what my heart already believed. Nothing else explains it now. I closed the notebook gently, as if not to break the fragile sense of control I had left. Somewhere beyond the window, in the quiet house next door, a light blinked on in Lila's living room, and I realized I was no longer just uneasy. I was afraid. The next morning arrived the way tension does, quietly, without ceremony, settling into the air before I even opened my eyes. I hadn't slept more than a few hours. Every sound in the house had kept me half awake, half aware, listening for footsteps that didn't belong to me, listening for the faint click of a lock turning or the creak of the hallway floorboard beneath someone else's weight. By dawn, I gave up on rest entirely. I wrapped myself in my robe and walked through the house as though my own home had become a place that needed checking. The front door, the windows, the porch, the side gate, the places Lila knew as well as I did by now. Everything appeared untouched. Everything looked normal. But normal, I'd learned, was just a disguise. When the phone rang shortly after 9, I jumped. A harmless sound. A familiar sound. Yet it sent a shiver through me. I steadied my breath, lifted the receiver, and forced calm into my voice. Hello? Mrs. Dowka? This is Janet from Fairview Savings again. My fingers tightened around the phone. Yes, I said. Is something wrong? Well, I'm not sure, she began. Her tone was kind, but cautious, as if she didn't want to alarm me unnecessarily. We noticed a second notification on your account this morning. My stomach dropped. What kind of notification? There was an attempt to authorize access to your online banking, she said. Someone tried to answer your security questions. What did they enter? My voice sounded thin, even to me. Your mother's maiden name. Correctly. I felt the room tilt, just slightly. My mother's maiden name isn't public information, I said. No, Janet agreed softly. It usually isn't. A coldness spread across my skin. What else did they try? They attempted your first pet's name, she said. They were close. Close. The word rang in my ears. I closed my eyes. My first dog had been named Teddy. I'd mentioned him once to Lila when she commented on the old photo tucked into a frame near my hallway. You look happy here, she had said. How long ago was this? Decades, I'd answered, brushing the picture fondly. That's Teddy. Sweetest thing. I still miss him. The conversation had lasted less than a minute, but she had remembered. "Mrs. Dalka?" Janet prompted. "Are you all right?" "Yes," I whispered. I'm here. We've locked your account," she assured me. "No action can be taken until you come in personally." "Thank you," I said. "Thank you for catching it. If anything else comes up, I'll call immediately." She hung up. I didn't move for a long time, the receiver still pressed to my ear. I stared at the kitchen counter, at my teacup, at the notebook lying open, at the sunlight streaming across its pages. Then slowly I lowered the phone, and the room stayed silent. A deep, heavy silence that had weight and shape and meaning. Someone had tried to answer my security questions. Someone who knew things a stranger shouldn't know. Someone who listened closely. Someone who watched. Someone who was very, very close. A soft knock sounded at my door. 3 taps, evenly spaced. My heart climbed into my throat. I crossed the living room in small, measured steps, looked through the peephole. Her. Of course it was her. Lila stood on my porch holding a potted fern. Lush, green. The kind of thing she knew I couldn't refuse without seeming rude. Something she could use as an excuse for dropping by unannounced. "Elaine," she called lightly, "I found this at the nursery this morning and thought of you. Are you in there?" The fern was a peace offering, a distraction, a wedge. I opened the door just enough to be polite. "Morning, Lila," I said. My voice sounded steady, but my fingers trembled around the doorknob. "Good morning," she said, stepping closer. "Did I catch you at a bad time?" "Yes, actually," I said. "I'm expecting a call." "A call?" she repeated, eyes flicking past my shoulder into the hallway. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said quickly. She tilted her head, studying me. "You look tired." I didn't sleep well. Her eyes softened or pretended to. "Nightmares?" "Just restless," I said. "You should have called me," she murmured. "I'm right next door." She was always right next door. She lifted the fern a little. "Can I put this inside? It shouldn't stay in direct sun." "No, thank you," I said. "I can take it." Her smile froze. It was subtle, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. But I was looking. I had learned to look. "Of course," she said. "I didn't mean to intrude." She stepped back slightly, though her eyes lingered on my face a little too long. "Did you get any important mail today?" "Why?" I asked. She blinked. "Just making conversation." I didn't respond. Something cold flickered in her expression before she masked it with warmth again. "Well," she said, brightening artificially, "I'll let you get back to your call. I'm making soup later. I'll bring some by." "No need," I said. She paused. Then her voice softened. "You know, Elaine, I worry about you." Her gaze moved slowly, almost as if she were assessing my health, my vulnerability, my usefulness to her. "You seem so overwhelmed lately." "I'm fine," I said firmly. She stepped back. "But not all the way. Not far enough." "Call me if you need anything," she said, her smile tightening at the edges. "Even if it's late." She walked off my porch. But instead of going home, she paused on the walkway, looking up and down the street with mild interest, as if checking whether anyone had seen her there, as if timing something, as if planning ahead. She finally returned to her house. I waited until I heard the soft click of her front door before I closed mine fully and turned the lock. The lock suddenly felt like nothing more than a suggestion. I walked to the table, sat down slowly, opened the notebook, Security questions attempted. Correct mother's maiden name. Almost got pet name. After phone call, Lila knocked immediately. Asked about mail. Insisted on bringing things inside. Persistent. Watchful. I added another line. Feels like she's keeping track of when I'm alone. My hand trembled as I wrote it. Not from fear, exactly, but from recognition. Recognition of a pattern that was no longer hiding beneath kindness. There was something else I needed to check. I went to the drawer where I kept important documents. Birth certificate, old tax returns, insurance papers. The folder looked undisturbed. But when I opened it, a faint smell of lavender rose from the pages. Lavender. The scent of her hand lotion. The same scent that always lingered on the handle of my mailbox after she helped retrieve my letters. I sifted through the folder with growing dread. Everything was there. Except one thing. The photocopy of my birth certificate. I sat back slowly. The empty space where it had been felt louder than any scream. A quiet, steady realization washed over me then. Colder than the morning air that seeped through the kitchen window. She wasn't just gathering pieces of my life. She was assembling them. Identity, routine, handwriting, personal history, relationships, medication, access, documents. Piece by piece, Lila was building a version of me. A version she could step into. A version she could become. I stared down at the open folder, at the missing document, at the faint lavender scent marking the intrusion. Then I wrote one last line in my notebook. She's preparing for something. But even as I wrote it, I knew the truth was sharper. She wasn't preparing. She was already beginning. The evening after I discovered the missing birth certificate photocopy, the house felt different. Not haunted, exactly, but intruded upon. As if the air itself carried fingerprints I couldn't wipe away. Every shadow made me pause. Every creak made me turn my head. I kept checking the locks, then checking them again, even though I knew I hadn't hurt anyone at the door. I walked room to room, trying to settle myself, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. It wasn't fear that shook them. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that arrives only after something undeniable has been crossed. Someone with a key had been inside my home. Someone with intention. Someone who moved like they belonged here. Someone who wanted what wasn't theirs. By the time night fully settled over the neighborhood, I had retreated to the only place in the house that still felt untouched, my husband's study. He'd built the room himself decades earlier, paneled in warm oak, with a wide desk that faced the backyard. Even now, long after he was gone, the space carried a kind of steady presence. His books lined the shelves in neat rows. History, gardening, a few well-worn mysteries. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. It was the one place Lila had never stepped foot into. At least, I hoped. I turned on the lamp, its golden glow softening the sharp edges of my thoughts. The familiar comfort of the room steadied my breath. My husband used to sit in that very chair, writing in his journal every night after dinner. Not to record anything extraordinary, just thoughts, reflections, pieces of his day. Quiet resilience, he called it. The act of writing things down so they wouldn't twist themselves into fears. Maybe that was what I needed now. I walked to the bottom drawer of his desk, the one that stuck just slightly when pulled too quickly. Inside was the leather-bound journal I hadn't opened since he passed. I lifted it carefully, as if it might crumble under the weight of memories. The leather was cracked and soft, the edges worn from years of use. I sat down in his chair, feeling the familiar creak beneath me, and opened to the first blank page. I meant to write my own thoughts. But instead, my eyes drifted to the earlier entries, the ones I'd never truly read. My husband's handwriting was steady, patient, unhurried. The kind of handwriting people acquire when they believe words matter. I skimmed the first few entries. Notes on the weather, memories of our son's childhood, small reminders to prune the fig tree in spring. Then, halfway down the page, I found something that made me pause. He had written, "Trust the quiet moments. They tell you what the noise tries to hide." I read it again and again. Trust the quiet moments. The words lodged themselves inside me with a weight I couldn't ignore. I ran my thumb over the ink as though touching it might reveal more. He'd written that years before he died. He couldn't have known what I'd face now, but somehow it felt like he did. I turned another page. A note about our anniversary. A memory of our dog. Then, near the middle of the book, another line that stopped my breath. If someone feels too close, too quickly, pay attention. Genuine people arrive gently. Only pretenders rush. My chest tightened. The room felt suddenly smaller. I flipped through more pages, carefully, slowly, and the journal began to feel less like a collection of memories and more like a map my husband had left for me. And then I found the entry that made my heart stutter. A stranger came by today asking about the Dalkas who used to live next door years ago. Odd. Said she was doing genealogy research. Something about her tone unsettled me. I felt something cold and electric crawl up my spine. Genealogy research. Next door. The entry was dated 6 years earlier. 6 years before Lila moved in. 6 years before she stood on my porch with her lilac shirt and charming smile. 6 years before she began slipping into my life piece by piece. I pressed a hand to my chest, steadying my breath as a truth formed slowly, painfully, like a bruise spreading beneath the skin. She had been circling this neighborhood long before she ever arrived. The noise of the house faded until only my heartbeat filled my ears. I turned another page, searching for more clues, more breadcrumbs my husband might have left. But the entry ended there. No follow-up, no explanation, no closure, only a feeling, only intuition. The same intuition that now pressed heavily against my ribs. My phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the stillness. I jumped. The screen lit up with a text message from an unknown number. I hesitated, thumb hovering. Then I opened it. "Did you make it to the bank today?" L. My mouth went dry. I hadn't told her I planned to go. I hadn't mentioned it while she stood on my porch with the fern. I hadn't said anything at all about the bank beyond the vague statement that I was expecting a call. Yet she knew. She always knew. Another message arrived. "If you want, I can drive you tomorrow. It's not safe for you to go alone." Not safe. Not safe because of what? Not safe because she wanted to protect me. Or not safe because she didn't want me speaking to the wrong people without her present? My hand shook. I set the phone down on the desk and closed my eyes. She was watching. She was listening. She was measuring every movement, every hesitation, every vulnerability. I opened my eyes and stared at my husband's journal again. At the words that now felt like a warning delivered across time. Only pretenders rush. I turned the lights off in the study, moved quietly through the house, checking the locks again. Then I went room by room, listening, truly listening, for anything out of place. At the hallway window overlooking the backyard, I paused. Lila's kitchen light flicked on. Her silhouette moved across the window. She wasn't cooking. She wasn't cleaning. She was standing still, staring out into the night, her figure perfectly framed in the warm glow, staring toward my house. My breath hitched. Did she know I was watching? Did she feel the shift between us? The break in the silence? The sharpening of my instincts? The quiet rise of awareness? She turned her head then, just slightly. Her profile caught the light. Her posture was relaxed, almost peaceful, as if she had all the time in the world. as if she believed she was ahead of me in a game I didn't know we were playing. I stepped back from the window, heart thudding. The darkness pressed close around me. But I was no longer afraid of shadows. I was afraid of what moved in the light. I went to the kitchen, opened my notebook, and wrote the newest truth. She's been watching this neighborhood for years. Then, trembling, I added, she didn't choose this house by accident. She chose me. As I set the pen down, a soft creak echoed from the front porch, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. But then I heard it again. A slow, careful step, followed by silence. I stood there, breath frozen, listening. Another step. And suddenly, I knew with absolute certainty, someone was standing on my porch. Someone who didn't knock. Someone who didn't want to be heard. Someone who knew exactly how my house sounded in the quiet. I reached for the phone with shaking fingers, but before I could dial, the footsteps retreated. Soft, deliberate, vanishing into the night. And in the silence that followed, a truth settled into my bones like cold water. She wasn't just gathering pieces of my life, she was testing the edges of it, to see how close she could get before I pushed back, to see how much of me she could take before I realized I was losing myself, to see whether I would notice her at the door, or whether I would let her in. I woke the next morning with a heaviness I hadn't felt since the days after my husband died, a weight behind my ribs, an ache in the place where certainty used to live. I moved slowly through the house, touching objects as if to remind myself they still belonged to me. My mug, my stove, my chair by the kitchen window. Everything felt slightly out of place, as though someone had shifted the world half an inch while I slept. The footsteps on my porch still echoed in my mind. Soft, careful, intentional. They hadn't been a dream. I brewed tea with unsteady hands and carried it to the table where my notebook waited. The last lines I'd written stared up at me like a cold truth I could no longer avoid. She chose me. She's testing how close she can get. My tea cooled untouched. I thought of the missing keys, the opened mail, the birth certificate copy that had vanished. I thought of the smell of lavender on paper she had no business touching. And I thought of Lila standing in her kitchen last night, her silhouette still and patient, like a hunter waiting for the moment the animal looks away. A chill swept through me. I could not keep wondering. I needed proof, something undeniable, something that could silence the small voice inside me that still wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, a voice built from years of teaching, nurturing, trusting. I reached for my purse and found the crumpled receipt from the electronics store where I'd bought new light bulbs last week. The address was printed at the top. I stared at it for a long moment. A hidden camera. I had never imagined myself buying one. I wasn't a suspicious woman. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't one of those people who saw shadows where there were none. But now the shadows were real, and so was she. I drove across town in a fog of determination. The electronics store was bright and loud, full of people comparing headphones, televisions, appliances. I lingered near the security section, pretending to read boxes while my heartbeat thrummed through my ears. A young employee approached. "Can I help you find something, ma'am?" "Something small," I murmured. "Something discreet." He smiled the way people do when they think they're helping someone harmless. Within minutes, he placed a small, thumb-sized camera into my hands. High resolution, easy setup, motion activated. It'll capture anything that moves within 20 feet. I paid the $97 without hesitation. As I drove home, the weight in my chest shifted. Not gone, but steadier, like strength waking up inside me. When I turned onto my street, I slowed. Lila's car wasn't in her driveway. Relief rippled through me, followed by a fresh wave of dread. Her absence didn't comfort me anymore. It made me wonder where she was, who she was watching, what she was planning. I parked and carried the small box inside. My hands shook as I opened it. The camera was even smaller than I expected, light as a coin, dark as a pebble. I held it between my fingers, feeling the unnatural power it represented. The power of seeing what had been hidden. It took me nearly 20 minutes to set it up. My hands fumbled with the tiny buttons, the instructions blurred, but I persisted. I positioned it on the top shelf of my living room bookcase, angled toward the front door. Invisible unless someone knew to look. I stood back, chest tight, palms damp. This was the line between doubt and certainty, between fear and knowledge, between staying silent and seeing the truth. I left the house for a few hours, on purpose, giving myself space, giving her opportunity. It was the hardest thing I had done in months. When I returned, afternoon light spilled through the living room window. The air was still. Too still. My heart pounded as I locked the door behind me and walked quickly to the bookcase. The tiny camera blinked once. Recording saved. I sat down slowly on the couch, opened the app on my phone, and pressed play. The footage began at noon. Nothing for the first few minutes. Sunlight shifting across the floor, dust floating softly in beams of light. Then, movement. At 12:12 p.m., the front doorknob turned. My breath hitched. The door opened just an inch, just enough for someone to slip inside quietly. And then she appeared. Leela. She stepped into my home with the ease of someone entering her own kitchen. She closed the door behind her without a sound. She wore soft-soled shoes, jeans, a fitted sweater. No expression on her face. No guilt, no hesitation, no concern. Only focus. Only intent. She walked straight to my writing desk, opened the top drawer, rifled through it, lifted papers to the light, examined envelopes, photographed a document with her phone, tucked something into her pocket. My chest tightened painfully. She moved next to the cabinet, touched my family photos, picked one up, stared at it too long, ran a finger over my husband's face. A strange tenderness flickered in her eyes then. Not affection, but longing. A fractured longing that made my skin crawl. She continued through the room, humming softly. Humming. As though she was at peace here, as though this place belonged to her. My teacup on the table, my knitting basket by the armchair, my husband's old hat still hanging by the entryway hook. She touched everything lightly, almost reverently. Then she walked into the hallway. The sound of drawers sliding open, then shut. My bedroom door creaked. My closet. My dresser. My jewelry box. When she returned to the living room, she was holding my locket, my mother's locket, gone for days, in her hand. She stood in front of my mirror, holding it against her throat as if trying to see how it looked on her. Her posture softened. Her lips curved faintly. She turned her head one way, then the other, studying the reflection, the way the locket shimmered against her skin. Then she whispered something. The audio was faint, but I leaned in, heart thundering. Almost perfect! She placed the locket in her pocket. Then she walked to my coat closet, reached inside, removed my old wool coat, draped it over her arm, held it like it belonged to her. And then, God help me! She stepped in front of the mirror again and pressed the coat to her chest, sliding her arms into the sleeves, testing how it fell on her shoulders. She stood there a moment, adjusting the collar, practicing, preparing, becoming. I felt my hands go cold. Then, as if she sensed something, some shift in the universe, her eyes snapped sharply toward the camera's direction. Not directly at it, but close enough that the breath caught in my throat. She lingered, listening, thinking. Then she slipped out, closing the door as silently as she'd entered. The recording ended. I sat perfectly still for several seconds. Then tears came. Not loud, heaving sobs, but hot, silent tears of disbelief, outrage, grief, all tangled together. I had seen enough. More than enough. Too much to pretend this was anything but what it was. She had been inside my home, inside my life, inside my history, inside my identity. And she wasn't finished. I wiped my face and replayed the footage, hands trembling. Every second of it was proof. Real, clear, undeniable. No one could dispute what I had seen. This was no longer suspicion. This was violation. This was invasion. This was a woman trying to step into my skin while I was still living in it. I copied the footage, saved it twice, backed it up, hid the camera, locked the app with a new password. Then I opened my notebook. Today, she entered my home, went through everything, took the locket, tried on my coat, said, "Almost perfect. She is practicing being me." My handwriting shook with each word. Then, after a long breath, I wrote the sentence I had been afraid to put into ink until now. This is no longer just about identity. This is about survival. Outside, a door slammed. I rose slowly, walked to the window, and peered out through the side curtain. Lila was standing in her driveway, looking at my house, smiling, as if she had all the time in the world. I didn't leave the house for the rest of the day. I couldn't. My legs felt unsteady, as though the floor beneath me had shifted into something uncertain. My breath was light and shallow. My hands still trembled from watching the footage. Those steady, chilling movements of hers as she walked through my home like she owned it. I kept replaying the moment she tried on my coat, the soft slide of the sleeves, the quiet adjustment of the collar, the whisper, almost perfect. I couldn't get the sound of her voice out of my mind. It followed me from room to room like a cold draft. By early evening, I had made a decision. I needed more than fear. I needed more than suspicion. I needed a plan. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my notebook. For the first time since this began, my writing was calm, focused, not frantic or panicked. A record was one thing, a strategy was another. I wrote 4 words: gather everything, set the trap. The next morning, I drove to the police station with the footage saved onto 2 flash drives. One in my coat pocket, one tucked into my wallet. It took everything in me to walk through those doors, to sit in a sterile lobby under buzzing fluorescent lights, waiting for someone to call my name. The officer I spoke to, Officer Ramirez, was kind, attentive, and very still. She watched the footage twice without interrupting. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed slightly. "This is serious," she said finally. "Very serious." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. "You say she used a key?" "Yes," I whispered. "My spare set is missing." "Did she ever have legitimate access to your home?" "No." "Did you authorize her to handle your mail? Your documents? Anything?" "No," Officer Ramirez folded her hands. "We're going to need to open a case. And I need you to be careful. Don't confront her alone." The room suddenly felt too warm. "I won't," I said. "We'll need more evidence," she continued. "Enough to show intent, enough to show a pattern, enough to prove she's not just trespassing but attempting identity theft." I swallowed hard. "How much more do you need?" "Enough to show she meant to replace you," Ramirez said gently. "And from what I've seen, she's close." My lungs tightened, breath catching in my throat. Replace me. The words weren't new. I had written them myself, but hearing them echoed aloud. spoken by someone who didn't doubt my instincts, who didn't dismiss my fear, gave them weight I wasn't prepared to feel. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, voice low. "For now, keep collecting. Document everything. Keep the camera in place. If she enters again, don't intervene. Call us immediately." I nodded. "And one more thing," she added. "Don't let her know you've been here." The thought had already passed through my mind, but hearing it spoken aloud made my fingers tremble. When I left the station, the daylight felt different. Too bright. Too exposed. As if the sun itself might reveal everything I had learned. I drove home slowly, checking the rearview mirror more than I needed to. Lila's car was still in her driveway when I pulled in. The sight of it made my pulse stutter. I walked inside my house quickly, locking the door behind me with a sharp click that echoed through the quiet. I looked toward the window. Her blinds were drawn. Of course they were. I checked the camera. Still recording. No alerts. I moved through the house, touching each lock, each window latch, each door frame. My hand trembled, but my mind was sharp. This was no longer about reacting. This was preparation. Core A, blank, underscore, blank. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Not her knock, a faster rhythm, more urgent. I peeked through the peephole and felt a surge of relief. Marjorie. I opened the door quickly and pulled her inside. "I've been calling you," she said. "You didn't answer." "I turned the phone off," I said. "I had to do something today." Her eyes scanned my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," I said softly. "Something worse." I led her to the living room, sat her down on the couch, and told her everything. The footage. The coat. The locket. The police. The investigation. Her expression shifted slowly from concern to anger to something fierce and protective. "Elaine," she whispered, "that woman is dangerous. I know. You need to be careful. I am." "You're not alone in this," she said, reaching for my hand. "I won't let her get near you again." A tear escaped down my cheek before I could stop it. "You've always been strong," she said, "but you don't have to be alone." We sat like that for a while, quiet, steady, and then she rose. "I'm staying the night," she said. "Not up for debate. I didn't argue." Blank, underscore, blank. The evening grew dark. Street lights flickered on. A hush settled over the house, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant rustle of wind through the trees. Marjorie settled into the guest room. I paced the hallway. I checked the locks again and again. Around 10, I walked past the living room window and felt my breath catch. A figure stood in Lila's yard. Still, silent, watching my house. The porch light illuminated part of her face, just enough to see the faintest smile. A cold, slow smile. She knew something had shifted between us. She didn't know what, but she sensed the distance, the change, the resistance, and she didn't like it. I pressed myself back from the window, heart pounding. A minute later, she approached my driveway. I stepped into the hallway, hidden from view, listening. She stopped at my porch. Silence, then a soft scrape, something sliding against my doorframe. I waited. Breath tight, muscles clenched, a shadow moved beneath the door. Then, nothing. Footsteps retreated, slow, deliberate. I exhaled sharply and reached for my notebook. 10:14 p.m. She came to the house. Didn't knock. Did something to the doorframe. Need to check in the morning. I snapped the notebook shut. The trap was setting itself. She wasn't backing away. She was circling closer. Patient. Hungry. Watching. But I was watching too. For the first time, I felt something new rising inside me. Not fear, not uncertainty. Resolve. This was no longer her game. It was mine. I barely slept. Even with Marjorie in the house, sleep felt like a luxury too fragile to touch. My mind kept replaying the sound I'd heard at the door, the soft scrape, the measured pause, the quiet retreat. A sound that didn't belong to chance. A sound someone made when they were certain they wouldn't be caught. At dawn, before the neighborhood stirred, I slipped a jacket over my nightgown and stepped onto the porch. The air was crisp, cold enough to sting my lungs. I kneeled slowly, one hand steadying myself against the rail, and examined the doorframe. It didn't take long to find it. A tiny slice of metal embedded near the latch, thin as a sewing needle. Purposeful. I touched it gently and felt the truth settle through me like ice. She had been testing a lock-picking tool. Not breaking in. Practicing. Preparing. The knowledge made my breath shallow. I pulled my hand away quickly, wiping my fingertips against my jacket as if the metal burned. From next door came the faint opening of a curtain. I didn't turn my head. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me startled. I simply stood and moved back inside, locking the door firmly behind me. Marjorie met me in the hallway, hair still flattened from sleep, robe tied tight around her. "What is it?" she whispered. "She was here last night," I said. "I found something." Fear flickered across her face. "We need to call the officer again." "I will," I said. "After we gather everything. I want every detail on record." Her jaw tightened. "Let me help." She meant it. That alone gave me enough strength to step forward. We spent the next hour checking the windows, the doors, and the cabinet where I kept my documents. Nothing else seemed disturbed. But the absence of new evidence didn't comfort me. Absence could be strategy. Around 9, Marjorie made tea and insisted I sit in the kitchen while she prepared breakfast. I let her, though my hands kept drifting toward the notebook on the table, flipping through pages I had written in moments of fear, confusion, and rising certainty. Patterns. Dates. Behaviors. Attempts. It looked, in its own quiet way, like a map of her intent. Marjorie placed a plate in front of me. "Eat something." "I'm not hungry." "You need your strength." I tried. I really did. But the food tasted like flour and air. A knock sounded at the front door. My breath hardened. 3 slow taps. Her taps. Marjorie's eyes met mine. She shook her head once. Sharp. Certain. I stood carefully, moved to the side window, and peeked through the curtain. Lila, holding a basket of muffins. Her expression was serene, composed, as if nothing in the world concerned her, as if her visit was nothing more than neighborly kindness. She knocked again. "Elaine?" Her voice floated through the wood, sweet and concerned. "I haven't seen you this morning. Just wanted to make sure you're all right." Marjorie stepped beside me and whispered, "Don't answer." Lila waited, then angled her head, studying the house. Her gaze traveled across the windows, the porch rail, the driveway, searching for a sign of movement. Searching for me. After a long pause, she set the basket down on the porch and walked away, slowly, almost reluctantly. We waited until her door closed before either of us breathed again. Marjorie spoke first. "She's escalating. I know she's not just curious or unstable. She's deliberate. I know, and she thinks she's winning." This time I didn't answer, because I knew that too. We moved the basket inside with kitchen tongs, just in case. It was nothing unusual. Blueberry muffins, a small jar of honey, a folded napkin with little violets on it. But the basket wasn't a gift. It was a message. I'm still here. I still know where you are. I still belong in your home. Marjorie stood by the sink, arms crossed. You need to call Officer Ramirez again. I will, I said. After we checked the camera, I retrieved my phone and opened the app. One alert. Motion detected, 3:17 a.m. My heart pounded. We stared at the screen together as the footage loaded. The living room appeared in gray-blue night mode, still and quiet. Shadows stretched across the floor like long fingers. At 3:17, the doorknob turned. Very gently, very slowly. It rotated maybe an inch. Stopped. Twisted again, then stopped. Not enough to open the door, but enough to test it. Enough to feel the tension of the lock. Enough to learn something. Lila's silhouette filled the frame. She leaned in, pressing her ear close to the wood, listening. Breath barely visible, but there. I could almost hear her exhale in the silence of my kitchen. She tried the knob once more, then her hand lifted. Something glinted in it, a thin metal tool. She slid it between the door and the frame, angling it downward. Testing, pressing, mapping the lock, studying the give of the metal, not breaking in, not yet, learning, preparing. She withdrew the tool, brushing her fingers along the frame as if checking her progress. Then she stood still, head tilted, listening for any sign from inside. For me, after another moment, she turned and glided off the porch, disappearing into the dark like a shadow returning to its source. The video ended. Marjorie grabbed the table for balance. My God. A long silence passed between us. Heavy, breathless. Finally, she said, Elaine, she's not just imitating you. She's not just wanting your life. I didn't speak. Couldn't speak. She's working up the nerve to take it. The words sank into the room like a cold stone dropping through water. I stood, legs unsteady, but resolve stronger than before. I walked to the counter, picked up my notebook, and wrote, 3:17 a.m. She tried the door again, studying the lock, testing my response, practicing in the dark. She's nearly ready. Then I added a new line. I cannot wait anymore. Marjorie touched my arm. What are you going to do? Exactly what the officer told me, I said quietly. I'm going to gather everything. And then? And then, I said, closing the notebook with a steady hand. I'm going to let her walk straight into the truth. Marjorie frowned. Walk into what truth? The truth she's worked so hard to ignore. I moved to the window again, looking toward Lila's house. Her blinds were slightly open now, just enough for her to see the street. She was watching. She always watched. But so was I. And I had something she didn't. Evidence. Witnesses. Support. Resolve. And the one thing she never expected, a plan of my own. Elaine, Marjorie whispered, you're scaring me. I turned toward her slowly. I'm done being afraid, I said. It's time for her to see that. Morning draped itself over the street in a thin layer of fog, soft and quiet, disguising what the day would become. I stood in my kitchen long before the sun fully rose, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. Marjorie slept lightly in the guest room, though I knew sleep for either of us was little more than exhaustion wearing a mask. Today had a pulse. Today had a direction. Today was the beginning of the end. I turned on the lamp above the sink, letting its warm glow spill across the counter. My notebook lay open, its pages thick with ink and truth. I read the most recent lines again, steadying myself. She is nearly ready. So am I. A quiet knock sounded at the guest room door. Marjorie stepped out, robe pulled tight around her, her hair pinned up in a messy twist she hadn't bothered to fix. "You're up early," she murmured. "I never went to sleep." She nodded, as though she expected that. "How are you feeling?" "Clear," I said. "Clearer than I've felt in weeks." She came to the table and sat across from me, eyes scanning my face. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I can be." "We're calling Officer Ramirez the minute something happens," she said. "Promise me." "I promise," I whispered. Truth was a living thing between us. She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "We're not doing this alone." I squeezed her fingers, grateful for the strength she'd been offering me every day since the mask began to slip off Lila's smile. By 7 o'clock, the street had begun to stir. A few cars rolled out for work. A dog barked. A sprinkler sputtered awake in a lawn down the block. Life went on, unaware of the quiet reckoning gathering at the edges of our houses. I stood at the window, watching. Her blinds were closed, her porch empty, her car still. Stillness was not comfort. Stillness was intention. Marjorie stepped beside me. "She's waiting." "I know." "She knows you know now." "Yes." She paused. "But she doesn't know you're not alone." I nodded. The minutes stretched, thick and slow. And then, just before 8, her door opened. Lila stepped outside with a confidence that made something cold crawl across my skin. She looked composed, controlled, deceptively calm. Her hair pulled back neatly, her face softly made up, her clothes chosen with care. She even carried a small container under her arm. Breakfast, no doubt, another offering meant to blur boundaries and soften suspicion. She started toward my house with a slow, steady grace. "She's coming," I whispered. Marjorie stood straighter. "Let her!" Lila's steps were light on the pavement. Her face brightened as she neared my porch, as though the past weeks had been nothing more than a pleasant series of neighborly exchanges. She didn't knock this time. She didn't offer food, or ask a question, or pretend concern. She tried the doorknob. It rattled once, firmly. Then again. Then she leaned close, speaking softly through the wood. "Elaine, are you there?" I stepped back from the door, heart hammering. Marjorie's jaw tightened. "Now we call." I dialed Officer Ramirez with shaking hands. My voice came out low but steady. "She's here. She's trying the door." "We're on our way," Ramirez said. "Do not open it. Do not speak to her. Stay together." I hung up as the knob twisted again, harder this time. Lila sighed, a frustrated, breathy sound, and knocked twice with her fingertips. "Elaine," she cooed, "I brought you something. Open the door, sweetheart." "Sweetheart." The word made my stomach clench. She paused. Then, in a softer voice, "I know you're scared. You don't have to be scared of me." Her tone held a coaxing gentleness that would have fooled me weeks ago. But now, even sweetness felt like violence. "Elaine," she murmured again. "Let me in." Marjorie grabbed my hand and squeezed. The doorknob twisted sharply, hard enough to rattle the frame. Then, suddenly, silence. A long, heavy silence. Through the peephole, I saw her posture shift from pleasant concern to something darker. Her smile flattened, her eyes sharpened. Her fingers traced the outline of the lock the same way they had the night she stood on my porch at 3 in the morning. Then she stepped back, scanned the street, and made a decision. She walked around the side of my house. My pulse surged. "She's checking the windows," Marjorie said, voice tight with fury. We moved quietly through the living room to the back hallway. A shadow crossed the side window, her shadow. She paused there, pressing her palm lightly to the glass, testing its give. "She's looking for a way in," Marjorie whispered. "She won't find one," I said, but my voice trembled. Lila moved to the kitchen window next. She tried that one too, quickly, efficiently, with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed these motions. My grip tightened around the phone. Then, suddenly, she froze. Because she heard something. Sirens. Faint at first. Growing louder. Approaching. Her head snapped toward the street. Her expression flickered. Confusion, disbelief, then a dawning horror she couldn't hide. She wasn't here to visit. She wasn't here to help. She wasn't even here to wait. She was here to enter. She was here to take. When she saw the patrol cars turning onto our street, everything inside her broke open. Her composure shattered. Her breath quickened. Her hands curled into shaking fists. "No," she whispered. Though I couldn't hear her, I saw the shape of the word on her lips. The officers pulled into my driveway first. 2 of them. Then another behind. Doors slammed. Boots hit pavement. "Mrs. Dalka?" one called. "Are you inside?" I opened the door just as Lila rounded the corner of my house, wild-eyed, breath sharp, chest rising and falling in panic. The officers turned. And for the first time since I met her, she looked small. "Ma'am?" Officer Ramirez called out, stepping forward. "We need you to come with us." "No," Lila whispered again, shaking her head. I didn't do anything." "Ma'am?" Ramirez repeated, her tone firm and steady. "We have evidence. Enough to detain you. Please place your hands where we can see them." Lila's eyes darted to me. Everything inside her, the charm, the calm, the stolen rehearsed persona, collapsed in a single breath. "You," she whispered, her voice breaking on my name. "Elaine, why would you do this to me?" Her words shattered through the morning quiet. I didn't speak. I didn't owe her one more piece of myself. Ramirez approached her carefully. Another officer stepped behind. Lila's breath hitched. Her shoulders curled inward. Her knees bent slightly, like the strength in her legs suddenly wavered. "I didn't mean," she whispered. But the truth had already spoken louder than anything she could say. Ramirez took her arm. Another officer supported the other side. They guided her toward the patrol car. She stumbled. She tried to look back at me one last time, her voice cracking around words that had lost all meaning. "I was helping you." Her mask was gone now. Bare-faced remorse, disbelief, desperation. None of it changed what she had done. My heart didn't swell with triumph, or gloat, or vengeance. It stayed steady, quiet, resolved. The officers opened the car door. She stepped inside. The door closed, metal on metal, soft, final. I exhaled slowly. Not relief, not victory, just truth settling into its place. Marjorie touched my shoulder. "It's over," she whispered. I wasn't ready to believe that yet. But as the police cars pulled away, taking her with them, the morning light spilled across my porch. Soft, clear, undeniable. And for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like a spotlight on my fear. It felt like dawn. The street fell into an uncanny silence after the police cars disappeared around the bend. A silence so complete it felt as though the neighborhood itself had stopped breathing. No dogs barked. No cars passed. Even the birds seemed unsure whether to resume their morning songs. Marjorie and I stood on the porch for a long moment, suspended in that quiet, absorbing what had just happened. "She's gone," Marjorie whispered, as if the air were still fragile enough to break. For a moment, I didn't answer. My eyes lingered on the empty driveway next door, on the closed blinds that once hid so much watching, so much calculation. I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and clarity, the kind that arrives not with triumph, but with truth settling into its final shape. "Yes," I said softly, "she's gone." But the truth was more complicated. A person can be removed from a place, but the echo of what they tried to do lingers. It clings to the corners of rooms, to the memory of footsteps outside the door, to the soft hum of a house remembering intrusion. "Let's go inside," Marjorie said gently. "You need to sit." We went to the kitchen, where sunlight was spilling across the table exactly as it had the morning before. But everything felt different. Changed. As if I were seeing my home again for the first time since she'd slipped into it without permission. Marjorie poured us each a cup of tea. I wrapped my fingers around the warm ceramic and let the heat seep into my palms, grounding me. The steam rose slowly between us, softening the edges of the moment. "How do you feel?" she asked. I took a breath, one that trembled and steadied all at once. "Tired," I said, "but lighter. Like something finally broke open that had been pressing on me for weeks." Marjorie nodded, her eyes full of both relief and the kind of protective anger only true friends can hold. "She had us all fooled," she said, "even me. I didn't realize how deep she'd gotten until I saw the way she looked at your house, like it was hers." A shiver moved through me. "She really believed that," I whispered, "that she belonged here." "She didn't," Marjorie said firmly, "and now she won't be back." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to let the reassurance settle fully into my bones. But fear is a creature that lingers long after the danger is gone. It takes time to learn safety again. Around 10 o'clock, the phone rang. I recognized the number immediately. Officer Ramirez. I exhaled and answered. "Yes?" "Mrs. Dalka," Ramirez said. "We're processing everything now. I wanted you to know we found several items in Ms. Loring's home, some of them yours." A cold wave washed through me. "My locket?" I whispered. "Yes," she said. "The locket. And more. Mail, personal documents, photos." She kept them organized. Marjorie clenched her jaw beside me, fists tightening. "We'll need you to come in tomorrow to identify the items officially," Ramirez continued. "But she's cooperating. She hasn't asked for bail. She's unraveling." I closed my eyes. "I see. And there's one more thing," Ramirez added gently. "Her online search history shows she'd been watching you for months before she moved in. Possibly longer." The room tilted. "Not just months. Years, if my husband's journal was any indication." But I wasn't surprised anymore. "Thank you," I said softly, "for everything. We're glad you came forward. This could have ended differently." After I hung up, Marjorie touched my hand. "You're shaking," she murmured. "I know." "Sit," she said. "Breathe." I sat. I breathed. And something shifted inside me. Not fear, but the slow unraveling of it. "You're safe now," she whispered. Safe. A word I hadn't dared claim for weeks. "We'll take it 1 hour at a time," she said. "I'm here. You're not facing any of this alone." I nodded slowly. Each breath steadied the next. A gentle rhythm returning. After lunch, Marjorie convinced me to rest. I lay on the couch under a soft blanket while she tidied the kitchen. The house was quiet, truly quiet, for the first time in so long. No footsteps outside the door, no shadow crossing the window. No soft hum of someone rehearsing my life in the darkness. Just peace. Just the sound of my friend humming faintly under her breath as she washed a few dishes. The notes were tender, familiar, comforting. When I finally drifted into a light sleep, it was the first real rest I'd had in weeks. I woke an hour later to the sound of Marjorie speaking softly on the phone. She was updating someone, her daughter, I think, assuring her that everything was under control, that she would be staying with me for a few days, that I wasn't alone. When she hung up, she sat beside me on the couch. "You know what I'm going to say," she murmured. "That I need to change the locks," I said. "That's one thing," she smiled faintly. "But what I meant is that you need to reclaim this house." I looked around the living room, my photos, my books, my plants, my memories, my air. Reclaim it. "I will," I said softly. "Start now," she urged. Before her shadow lingers too long. I stood slowly, one hand still clutching the blanket. I walked to the coat closet, opened it, and reached for the place where my favorite wool coat hung, where she'd once tried it on. My hand hesitated. But I touched it. I touched the coat gently, then firmly, reclaiming it as mine. A piece of myself she had tried to wear like a costume. "That's it," Marjorie whispered. Next, I went to my jewelry box, opened it, touched the empty space, where the locket would soon return, and instead of grief, I felt a quiet promise forming inside me. "You get to come home too." I walked through my house room by room, touching everything she had touched. My desk, my framed photos, my cabinets. With each touch, I felt a small piece of myself return. Each step a reclamation, each breath a strengthening, each moment a soft unfolding. By late afternoon, I sat back on the couch, notebook in my lap, pen in hand. For the first time since this started, the words didn't feel like warnings. They felt like closure. Lila is gone. She did not win. I am still here. This house is mine. I closed the notebook gently and rested my palm on its cover. "I'm proud of you," Marjorie said. I inhaled slowly, letting her words settle deep inside. "I'm proud of me too." In the days that followed, life began to settle back into its familiar rhythm. Not the rhythm I'd known before she arrived. No, that life was gone. But in its place was something steadier, clearer, a life reclaimed. I planted new lilies near the hydrangeas she once trimmed without my permission. Their pale blooms opened slowly under the morning sun, quiet but certain. I found comfort in that. Renewal often comes softly, without announcement. I met with officers, signed documents, and placed the evidence away in a drawer I rarely opened. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I chose not to live inside the fear she left behind. At night, I slept, truly slept. And when dreams came, they were not shadows at my door. They were memories of my husband's laughter, of my son's childhood footsteps, of the life I had built long before she tried to slip into it. The locket hung again in my jewelry box. The keys were replaced, the locks were changed, and the house, my house, felt like it was breathing easier too. One evening, I stepped onto my porch alone for the first time since her arrest. The sky was fading gold, soft at the edges. My garden rustled gently in the breeze, and I realized something that made my chest loosen with the simplest kind of relief. Peace has a sound, it's quiet, but not empty. It's the sound of a life returned to its rightful owner. And as I stood there in the warm twilight, I felt the weight of everything she tried to take, and everything I refused to surrender, settle into a lesson as clear as the air around me. In that moment, I understood that surviving isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, it isn't revenge or triumph. It's the quiet decision to stay yourself when someone else tries to unmake you. Looking back now, I see that the strength I needed was already there. Waiting, steady, patient, just like the truth that finally revealed her. What I learned from it all was simple. and it's something I hope stays with anyone who hears my story. Fear can change your life, but so can courage, and courage doesn't roar. Sometimes courage whispers, "This is my life. You cannot take it. I am still here." I didn't know it that morning, watching the police car pull away, but the quiet that followed would become the beginning of my peace. If you've ever had someone step too close to your life, if you've ever had to take your strength back inch by inch, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. And if this chapter of my life spoke to you, please remember to like the video. Your support truly helps these stories reach others who might need them. Don't forget to subscribe too. There are more stories coming, and I'd be honored to have you with me when the next one unfolds. Until then, take care of your home, take care of your peace, and take care of yourself.